and Stephanie Wyman. Also with us tonight is Marla Keene, our development review planner, and Delilah Hall, our zoning administrator. Let's start.
Jim?
Oh, Jim, I'm sorry.
Jim by phone?
Jim, are you with us? Jim Langen?
Let me see who's in attendance. I do not see anybody on call.
Okay, well, we are expecting Jim Langen by phone, so hopefully he will join us soon. Okay, we're going to suggest one change to the agenda tonight. Item number 8 is going to.
Losing weight too fast or something?
I'm sorry? We're going to move item 8 up before item 6, and agenda item number 4 and 5 are being continued to October 19th. So we actually will be reviewing 2 projects tonight, which are number 6 and number 7 on the agenda. So I'd like to ask that people sign in on the sign-in sheet at the back of the room. And if you're attending online, please sign into the chat room so that we know you're a participant for any future actions you would like to take. And also, we ask that you, if you're not speaking, turn off your camera and turn off your audio, sorry. If you want to speak, turn your camera back on and raise your hand, and we'll acknowledge you. And typically, we go over the staff report for every I'll get you in a minute, for every project, and the board engages with the applicant, and then we ask the public if they have any comments. So I just saw a hand go up. Sharon, yes.
I just wanted to make sure I understood. We're here for item 9. Is that not being covered? No, item 8. Is that mean not being covered tonight then?
Item 8, as it turns out, will not be covered tonight.
So what'll
Okay,
happen
great.
is the board will decide in a few minutes what date they're going to continue it to. So if you want to stick around for the next 5 to 10 minutes, you can find out when to tune back in.
Perfect. And then is there a way that we could find out more about it? Like, do we ask you or do we call Larkin? I just didn't know the right procedure because we don't really understand how to
If you
read
send
it.
me an email, I would be happy to get you whatever information you're looking for, and I can. Actually, Delilah, would you mind putting my email address in the chat box since you're logged in? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And if you're attending by phone, you can send Marla an email to sign up. Her email address is mkeene, Keene, at sburl.com. We ask that you refrain from conversation in the chat box because it isn't part of the public record. It's more for administrative use. And with that, I will ask if there are any comments. Well, maybe let's do emergency procedures.
Yeah. So emergency procedures, the front door is to your right as you exit the auditorium. There's a back door to your left if both of those are unavailable. If you go down the hall, out the left door, and there's another back door by the senior center also to your left.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any comments or questions from the public that aren't related to the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, let's move on to item number 8.
So we do need to decide whether to accept the continuation requests for 4 and 5.
Okay, do we vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to accept the request for continuation for items 4 and 5.
I'll make a motion to do so. I just want to discuss it a little bit.
Sure. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. Go ahead. Discussion.
Yeah, what are since I'm relatively new to the board, what are the standards for requesting continuance?
Applicants send me a written request. we recommend that they send a date that they would like to be continued to, and then there's a $50 continuation fee, which we waive often when there are extenuating circumstances, such as something out of the applicant's control.
Right. Does the board ever take test, only because I don't know how much notice there was provided, and I saw a Facebook post about, hey, dog park, and so I just wondered if people wanted to talk about it or provide, or is the board able to take testimony, or?
Yeah, the board can take testimony. It would be part of the record. But you do need the applicant to have an opportunity to respond to the testimony, so we would just have them read the minutes and provide their response when
Right.
they.
No, I just wondered if there are any people in the building or online who wanted to say something about either of the two applications, briefly, obviously understanding, but you never know if they'll have a chance to testify again, or so.
So,
I would note that both 4 and 5, it was in the warning that they'd be continued. So, people can also provide written testimony.
Yeah.
And they did know as of Friday that would be the case.
so I think that's a good question, Dan. So, pardon me, let's just take a pause and ask if there are any members of the public who were intending to make comments on items 4 or 5, who would like to do that tonight, as opposed to waiting till October 19th. Hearing none, I guess we'll move on to item number 8. We have to
need
vote. We have to vote, okay. Are there any other items of discussion for this motion? No. All in favor of the motion, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Oh, there's Jim. Hi,
Jim just come in.
The motion is carried.
No, I've been on.
Okay, now moving on to item number 8. Item number 8 is the miscellaneous permit application MS 2104 of Larkin Realty for stream alteration and stormwater drainage modifications at 1195 Shelburne Road. Okay,
Can I make an introduction?
you may.
So the applicant today requested a continuation. They did not have a date in mind. I would recommend to give them time to continue to October 5th, which will be not the next scheduled date, but the date after.
And do we need to vote on that?
You do. I also have a second observation.
Okay.
I received a comment letter from Thomas and Kathy Easton about this project. I will paraphrase and then I will send it to the board, and it will be up on the website with the packet at a later date.
Stephanie is recused, do we need to say?
Yeah, I guess
Stephanie, you are recused, yes.
Thank you.
I'm just going to paraphrase what they said. They live in Holmes Road. They try to pay attention to the DRB, but they're unable to attend. They wanted to let the board know that the Holmes Road neighborhood is interested in MS 2104 and continue to follow the progress of the application as well as subsequent development of the property. And that is all I have to say.
And you will send that out?
I will send that
Good.
out.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to entertain a motion to move agenda item number 8 to the October 5th Development Review Board meeting. I'll go ahead and make that motion. How's that? Are there any seconds?
Second?
Discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye. The motion is carried. Thank you. And Stephanie can join us. And now we're moving on to agenda item number 6. Jim, I know you're recused from this. Are there any other recusals or disclosures? Hearing none, we will invite the applicant up. And please introduce yourself.
My name is Nick Smith with Lamoureux and Dickinson, representing the applicant as the engineer.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to swear you in. Raise your right hand, please. If you promise what you're about to say represents the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under penalty of perjury.
I do.
Would you like to introduce us to your project? We've all read the staff report, we're all familiar with it, but it's very helpful to have a little overview from applicants.
Sure. Yeah. I'll just briefly go into this because I think the board's seen it quite a number of times at this point. This was the project at 47 Cheesefactory Road. It's a 67.6 acre parcel that is being subdivided as a 3-lot PUD. 2.6 acre lots, lots 2 and 3, and then the remainders of the area would be lot 1. The majority of that would be in conservation or agricultural use. Since our previously being in front of the board for sketch plan, there were a few modifications that have come up. So I'll just kind of briefly go through those. Number one, we had met with the state wetlands program, Tina Heath, and the wetlands that were previously identified as class 3 to the west of the access was reassessed to be a class 2 wetland, and a wetland buffer associated with it. It's, as I'm sure you guys are aware, the way the state handles wetlands and agricultural use may vary from the way that the city does. So although this is a class 2 wetland, the agricultural use that is currently happening is it's not an issue for the state. It's non-jurisdictional. Also meaning that the associated wetland buffer that is attached to it is also non-jurisdictional. So they have, so long as there's no impact to the wetland, there's no wetland buffer, which means that the state is happy with our current proposal, which actually is relocation of the driveway, the access driveway off of Cheesefactory Road, approximately 30 feet to the east. So we're now avoiding the wetland. We're within the buffer still. And there's no grading, there's no other impacts to the wetland. So yeah, again, that would mean that the state has no issues with it on as far as that's concerned.
Thank you. Other changes that you want to update us on?
I don't believe there's any other changes.
Okay, thanks. So let's go through the staff comments.
Okay.
Number 1.
Actually, it did come to me. I forget, since it has been a little while since through the process here, we actually did remove quite a bit of the stormwater infrastructure. We were previously showing a bioretention. We were fairly close to the half acre, so preemptively we were going to do a whole bunch of stormwater improvements to the site. However, based on the recent modifications and kind of some previous modifications that we hadn't quite adjusted in our calculations, we're well below that half acre now. So we've decided that we'll still try to maintain as much disconnect treatment as possible, but we're no longer proposing that bioretention that was actually within the wetland buffer as well. So we're trying to minimize some impacts over there.
Thank you. Okay. Let's go to the comments. Number 1, the applicant has shown what potentially appears to be a building envelope on the plans, though it is unlabeled. The regulations do not require a building envelope, but if the applicant is asking for flexibility in locating the homes other than in the location shown on the plans, a building envelope may facilitate that request. Staff recommends the board discuss with the applicant the purpose of the dash line on each lot and describe if their intention is to modify the buildings from the location shown in any way. So I think that we'll ask you to respond to that, and
Yep.
then the board can ask any questions.
Yep. So that is the intention of that dashed line. I think it's labeled in the legend, possibly not called out anywhere else. So it could be. I could see where that got lost. But it is the intention that would be the building envelope. So so that we had some flexibility to site the houses based on the wastewater system's possible movement, and some other items as far as grading and ledge in the area. So we are requesting, some flexibility in the building lots. Those are pictorial footprints for houses.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Staff? No. Okay. Moving on to staff comment number 2. And this is in regard to landscaping, stormwater treatment, etc. Staff recommends the board discuss with the applicant how they have, quote, minimized and are offset by appropriate landscaping, stormwater treatment, stream buffering, and other mitigation measures, unquote, the proposed wetland impacts in the context of the functions and values provided previously in the staff report. Staff considers if the board finds minimization or mitigation to be insufficient, there may be simple measures that can be taken to offset the proposed driveway and grading impacts. Staff recommends the board and the applicant work together to develop specific changes, if any, such that the preliminary plat hearing can be closed and the modifications addressed at the final plat stage of review.
Madam Chair,
Sure, go ahead, Dan.
did our stormwater public works staff have any comments on this?
No, because it's under the half-acre threshold, they kind of shut down on it and said, it's under the half-acre threshold. And I said, thanks for your feedback.
Okay, thanks.
But the LDRs have criteria.
And the criteria are related to wetland impacts. So does everybody understand kind of what happened with the wetlands and how it's non-jurisdictional for the state, but jurisdictional for us? Took me a couple read-throughs to get this.
It's very challenging. I mean, it's not intuitive. That's all. Yeah.
The state exempts agricultural use from being considered a wetland impact. So because the wetland and its buffer currently are in agricultural use, the state considers that it doesn't matter that those impacts may continue, or they are not impacts.
As long as it remains in agricultural use,
Right.
they will not take jurisdiction over the wetland.
Okay.
So the applicant has removed all of the proposed impacts from the wetland itself in order to retain agricultural exemption. However, they have it pretend for a moment that there is a wetland buffer. For the purposes of the state, there is not, but for the purposes of the city, there is. They have impacts to the buffer. Because the wetland itself remains agriculturally exempt, the state does not consider it as having a buffer, but we do. So the wetland buffer is impacted as far as the board is concerned, but not as far as the state is concerned.
Perfect.
Still very confusing. So the if you can go to page 14, I believe it is, Delilah, is the plan, and you can kind of see the wetland buffer. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's try 17. So you can see the wetland and the wetland buffer on the plan here. I don't know if Delilah, you could point them out.
I could point it out if you'd like.
It's not that. That's the tree line. Is here. Yep, that one. Sort of straight up and down. Sure. That's the wetland buffer, and it kind of comes around. So everything left of that yellow line is within the wetland buffer, and everything right of it is not. So the staff comment here is to discuss what mitigation and minimization has been done, and whether that is, and whether the board considers the wetland buffer impacts to be allowable.
I have a more obvious question. Is there an existing curb cut there? Like, why does the curb cut go right through the buffer?
There's not an existing curb cut. The existing curb cut, you can just see it on the left of the
Okay.
plan.
So,
Yeah.
could the curb cut be moved slightly to the east?
So to the east is, and this was kind of one of the discussions we've had in the past, is it's a very ledgy area and we're trying to keep as much vegetation as possible. As you get farther to the east, there's some issues too with sight distance, a little bit more so, not so much on this because it is very flat, but if you were to start getting very far east, but if we were trying to shift outside of the buffer, we would be running through some of the highest ledge points. We'd be removing quite a bit of existing vegetation, and I think it would require quite a bit of blasting probably to get down to the elevation that we would need to make the road grades work.
And just for Nick's benefit, some of the members of this board were not on the board at the time of the last
Yep, sorry, yep.
iterations.
Other questions from the board? Thoughts? Do we think that the applicant has presented adequate, pardon me, adequate measures, or would we like to see more at final plat?
Is there much of a drainage that it's actually going to cross? Like, is there going to be a culvert under there?
We are currently showing a culvert, yep, and it does discharge, you can see, into the wetland buffer to the southwest or to the west, I guess, of really the curve. And it's not a large drainage area, but it's significant enough to have some kind of drainage across it. And if I could just point out any mitigation that we may have done, if the board deems it that, we have shifted the driveway 30 feet to get obviously fully outside of the wetland itself, reduce impacts to the buffer. We've removed the bioretention area that was totally within the buffer. We're providing some minimal landscaping even outside of the buffer that does kind of delineate a little bit more so that area. There are options for reducing the road width, although that would probably be very insignificant as far as minimizations go. But yeah. So.
Can you bear with me for some more basic questions?
Sure.
Relatively speaking, how far are these farm labor dwellings going to be from the farm operations?
The farm operation will be all of, or the majority of Lot 1. So they'll.
I'm just wondering if is this the only place that the housing could be from a okay to site perspective, or in other words, why are the lots here as opposed to closer to the farm buildings?
There's a few reasons. I guess some of the bigger items were, number one, where the lots are sited now is nearly unusable as far as agricultural purposes due to kind of the location and the grading, and then also some of the existing vegetation and also the ledge in this area. So we've kind of sited them back. We've also are trying to provide some buffering from along Cheesefactory Road.
And is there any kind of like internal farm access road, or is basically anytime the workers go back and forth to their housing, they're always going on Cheesefactory Road?
I would assume that they would be accessing from Lot 1. That would be my thought, is that they're accessing off of the internal access drive that we're proposing from the Lot 1 driveway, more than likely.
I want to make sure I understand. So they would have to go out to Cheesefactory Road.
I don't. I guess my understanding is that they would not be doing that. That they would be internalizing off of the Lot 1 driveway. If the lot farthest to the west there. and they would probably be accessing or off of the end of the turnaround that we're showing on the far east lot.
So is there an internal farm road that we're just not seeing in this drawing?
Just talking about the new proposed gravel driveway, the access driveway that's serving these lots.
So if they want to access the farm, we're talking bread and butter farm, right?
We're talking. I'm talking this lot in particular here, but which
But
is
the
a parcel.
farm for
Mhm.
whom they work for is bread and butter
Yep,
farm.
yep.
So if they want to get from their house to the farm
Then-
without going on the road, do they take?
Well, they would then need to use Cheesefactory Road. Sorry,
Okay.
yes,
Okay,
sorry.
All right.
that's what I was
Yep.
trying to clarify.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought. Sorry, I was misunderstanding.
okay.
This lot, as far as the agricultural use on this lot, they could access internally. Obviously,
Right.
anything that's not on this lot, yes, they would need to go into
Okay.
Cheesefactory.
Other questions, Jan? Or anyone else?
It's okay right now.
But just to clarify, in the future, if they did decide to construct, you know, a mowed path or whatever through the property to the farm buildings,
Right.
that would be agriculturally exempt and we would never see it.
Sure.
Right, yeah.
Any other thoughts people have about requirements for final plat? Or are we, and do
Are
you have any
Are
comments?
we going through the rest of the questions or the rest of the numbered
There's no other
statements
comments.
in red?
Uh,
You have number 3.
No, I know. But any other related to 2?
I think some of the questions asked in 2 are formulated slightly differently in 3 and 4.
Okay.
So
All right, let's go to 3. No buffering or fencing. I am sorry, I'm hoarse. No buffering or fencing is proposed. Staff considers landscaping or fencing buffers may be an appropriate measure for protection of the impacted Class 2 wetlands buffer and recommends the board discuss whether it should be required. Board members, what do you think to protect?
If this was quote unquote regular housing, we would normally require some rudimentary delineation
Mhm.
through a wood fence or boulders or
Right,
something.
Right,
And without putting us in a weird situation, this is going to remain an agricultural use, so the delineation is not. It would be less warranted, I would assume, than it would be if it was regular housing, because there will be some access to that portion to continue for agricultural use. So.
Right. I guess from my standpoint, when I think about, initially, yeah, but over time, and then people might be like parking extra pickup trucks, and there'd be like sort of this drift of, and that's sort of a
Yep.
quasi nebulous area where people could easily like, oh, I'm going to park the rig here and park the, again, not to say they're not aware of it, but
Mhm.
things might change. 10 years from now, people might forget that you're supposed to stay out of that
Yep.
area.
I think
That's all.
that's a great point as well, and I think we.
It doesn't need to be elaborate, but just
Yeah, I think the applicant would be more than happy to add maybe another set of trees just to delineate that a little bit better and kind of restrict that so it really wouldn't be quite so accessible necessarily.
that's a great suggestion. Any other comments about that? Okay. Thank you for that. Moving down the report, number 4. Staff recommends the board determine whether the road should be reduced to 18 feet wide at the wetland buffer crossing. The reduction would slightly reduce wetland impacts, but its location near Cheesefactory Road would make the turn into the private road more difficult. Oh, good.
what's the rough distance between the edge of the cheese factory and where this would be proposed to be widened? Roughly.
So where
Or not widened, but reduced to 18 feet. I'm just trying to get a sense of
yeah, that becomes maybe the contention is it really would likely be reduced in width for less than 50 feet, and then it would then be outside of the wetland buffer, and I'm assuming it would be required to be back at the 20 feet access width. So it would then, meaning it's bottlenecking right at Cheesefactory Road, obviously, the last 50 feet of it approximately.
So the reduction to 18 feet would be in the right of way of Cheesefactory, or
It would partly be in the right of way, and then it would carry my assumption would be 50, maybe a total of 50 feet, maybe 25 feet past the right of way, 30 feet past the right of way.
do you have a sense of where this line would be drawn if we did the Marla?
Sorry, I just logged into the meeting so that I can draw. So the question is,
I'm just trying to get a
If they
sense
were
of
to
where,
reduce-
if we were to accept this reduction to 18 feet wide,
right,
somewhere in the drive, I'm trying to get a sense of where
I
that
mean, it
would be.
the width of my highlighter through the wetland.
So
buffer.
it's fairly close to the entrance, right? Okay, I was thinking if it was farther south that
Yep.
there would still be room for 2 pickup trucks to come in, but in this the case that 18 feet would make it a challenge. Yeah. So
Yeah, and I guess just briefly, the assumption would be that we'd be reducing this 2 feet for 40 to 50 feet ends up being kind of a negligible amount of reduction to the buffer impacts. That's all.
Other thoughts about that, board?
I mean, I feel like it's kind of standard practice from what I've seen, is that when you're in a wetland buffer or wetland, you always try to neck it down as much as possible to minimize your impacts. And
Mhm.
so it's happened a lot on access roads that I've had to design that are typically 12 feet wide. We'd bring them down to 10 feet. So I mean, I see what you're saying. It is right at the entrance, but like, how many trips are you anticipating, and are you seeing a lot of conflicting in and out throughout the day, where this would actually become an issue versus being able to, if you did neck it down and there's not a significant number of trips, it really wouldn't
Yep.
cause too much of a problem.
Yeah, I think that is a valid point, that there would not be likely a lot of in and out conflicts. I don't know what other type of equipment will be, maneuvered in or out, or trailers or anything like that. So the increase or the standard access width maybe have some benefit to it also for some of the larger maneuverability of vehicles and things like that. But I see your point as well, that there's probably not a lot of conflicts only having three houses on this at maximum.
So can you all think about that? And when we'll look at it again at final plat?
Yeah, we'll see what
Okay.
we can take a
Okay.
look.
Thing would be something like the board asks the applicant to consider.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
Number 5, staff recommends the board discuss whether they will require the applicant to reduce the width of the lots to meet this criterion. Staff notes the board approved the proposed lot dimension in SD 1935, but since that approval is expired, the board is in no way beholden to that decision. Okay. What do we do with this? Board, should we require the applicant to reduce the width of the lots?
I have a more basic question.
Sure.
We've got 3 lots here that are all supposed to be farm labor housing, right?
Mhm.
Owned by Bread and Butter Farm, rented to Bread and Farm. I don't know if that's going to be an easement or any way enforceable. But why do we have, and it's all one common owner really, why do we have, is there a way to have 1 septic lot instead of 3?
We are exploring the possibility of combining this wastewater system into one system, especially in this case where you've got quite a bit of elevation change. You might be able to reduce a couple tanks because there is the ability to centralize that. We haven't quite gotten far enough to determine what will be the most efficient economically and generally, but there is a chance in the future that would happen, and it would require that we would have an easement, probably a shared easement between all the lots over that septic system. Then
Thank
it
you.
is something we are considering, but just have not gotten into the full design on that yet.
Other questions, Jan?
is it feasible to have lots fully compliant with the, with lots, can you do this with lots that are essentially half of what you're proposing? Because I'm looking at staff comments saying the applicant is proposing lots double this size. If we're any other applicant besides a farm, we'd say you need to be closer to the lot size.
Well, this is the minimum lot size, correct? So does it,
So this is about the lot width to depth ratio. And the width to depth ratio is, the purpose of that is to create lots that have sort of a neighborhood feel to them. So narrow, deep lots tend to push the buildings towards the street, and people are more engaged in their neighborhood. And Delilah's the planner in the room, so maybe you can speak more to this, but is that generally correct?
And that makes for, a friendlier neighborhood.
Right. So
More
the
engaged.
idea would be having skinnier lots would make these homes closer together and have sort of a friendlier neighborhood. But given that there's only three, that's sort of the counter argument is that, like, why bother? There's only three homes.
And they probably know each other anyways because they work together.
and we
And
were
don't wanna
talking.
be together after
Yeah.
work too.
Exactly. And we were talking too about the building envelope, so the building setback envelopes that we were proposing earlier. So as you can see, they are pushed up towards the new access, so they wouldn't allow for these lots to be very far backward, very far south, I should say. So it does accomplish, it sounds like, the goal essentially.
Are we ready to move on, or do folks have other questions? And I think that's, did you? No. I think that's it for the staff comments. Are there any general questions or comments?
I
folks?
have a question more for staff. Are we hypothetically approving this as just single-family homes that are allowed? Or are we approving this as farm dwellings? Because they're all still going to be owned by bread and butter, right? So they can't be sold, right? Is that correct?
That is not a condition of the city's approval. However, in the packet, the draft conservation easement does have some restrictions on the use of this subdivision. Let's see. You don't have that at
My
your fingertips,
apologies, I
Nick,
didn't
do you?
read that.
I have it in front of me. There's kind of a lot of restrictions that get placed on it, so I
Here it
don't
is.
know
It's,
where the.
it's page 32. This is the farm labor housing paragraph 11. They can construct 3 residential dwellings with customary appurtenant utilities and improvements. And then it lists sort of what shall be freely alienable. Oh wait, sorry, that's the access for easements and things. So it does the land trust conservation easement restricts the use of them. And so by incorporating this into the DRB's decision, it would be restricted in that way.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at, because I can't read all that right now, and I apologize, I should have read it before, is I guess the main question is, like, if we're approving this and we're approving the easement, I just want to be sure that this doesn't basically become open market rental. It's having its intended purpose, is to serve as.
Well, so in the SEQ NRP, there is no requirement for this. That's what they're proposing, but that's not what our regulations require. The SEQ NRP says for a parcel over whatever it is, 10 acres, 15 acres, you can subdivide up to 3 lots and no more ever. And those 3 lots can be used as single family housing, and they could be sold to offset the cost of conserving the remainder of the land, or they could be retained, or however they want to do it. So for us to place additional restrictions on the use of these subdivided lots, I think is beyond what the LDRs contemplate.
I hear you, but I also know that the city has put in a significant amount of public money into this property. And so there's this quid pro quo, maybe too strong a word, but there's an expectation.
Mhm.
The city council has talked about this property. There's an expectation of, there's the deal. You guys are running a farm, and in exchange, they've gotten $915,000 or something like that. So that's why, and again, I have to read this more clearly on the farm labor housing. If that's the intent, that's the intent.
Mhm.
I would not want to find out 5 years from now that in this rental housing market, they're renting it
To anyone.
to anyone. Exactly. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
And I think,
Brandon might be on the
Yep.
phone and might be able to speak a little bit more to what this paragraph 11 actually means.
Who's Brandon?
Brandon Bliss, you probably want to swear him in.
Yes. Brandon.
Hey, yep. So this is Brandon
You're on
Bless.
the
Can
phone.
you hear me?
Hi. Thank you. I'm going to swear you in.
Sure.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So go ahead. Tell us what your thoughts are.
Yeah. Let me clarify a couple things. So one, yes, this is one big conservation project, and the city has donated $915,000 towards conservation. We have not received any of that money, so that money does not go to Bread and Butter Farm, and it shouldn't be construed as such. It goes towards conservation. The city is buying conservation, which is exactly what we're executing on 375 acres. And also doing farm projects that are community-based projects. As a component of that, we're doing farm labor housing and farm community housing, which is what you're reviewing right now. If we could manage to do what we're trying to do, which is affordable housing for our farm community and other locations, we would. We've deemed this as, where we can do what we need to do to sort of survive and thrive as a farm. So the contribution from the city is wonderful, but it does not mean we can't have farm community housing. But I also think it's key to, I think the term farm labor housing maybe has some baggage with it. So I would kind of throw that out in this case and consider this farm community housing, meaning that we have people here that say work in the cafe, or they work for Bread and Butter Farm, or they have their own business that's connected to what we do. This housing is intended to be available for them, and it's not the farm that's owning the housing. It is the farm families that live here that are owning those house sites. So while, say, an owner of Bread and Butter Farm may actually own one of these house sites, an owner of Blank Page Cafe may own one of these house sites, etc. So I'd want to make sure that we're understanding that it's a little bit more comprehensive and intended to be more comprehensive than that. There could be a scenario where these house sites are being rented. That's not their intention. They're not intended to be vehicles for revenue or for market rate anything. We're applying additional layers and protections and covenants to make sure that these house sites remain in perpetuity part of the farm community. But that's on us. As Marla said, that's not within the purview of the city to say we can or cannot do that, or we can or cannot use this as farm labor housing, or really market rate homes for that matter. We're the ones putting our own restrictions on that to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I would say, in looking at this application, I would encourage you to look at it as, yes, it is a farm community project, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't be reviewed under the same stringent manner that you would apply to any other project in the city. That said, I think in the Southeast Quadrant, conservation is key, and I think that's what we're trying to do in this project, and also trying to minimize the impact of the house sites. I think some of the ratio design and the limited lot size maybe didn't fully contemplate the need for septic systems, because those are not as common in South Burlington, and that's very understandable. But what we tried to do here based on engineer advice was really limit the impact and the footprint of all these house sites. We're going above and beyond and actually conserving all of the land underneath these house sites as well. So even the subdivided parcels, we're only subdividing because the city requires us to subdivide in order to have 3 housing units here. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be seeking subdivision. So the entirety of the parcel will be conserved when we're done in January.
Thank you. What are your thoughts, Dan?
I hear the,
Okay.
yeah.
I would also think it would behoove the farm to help retain its employees, to make rental housing available to them. because we know how hard it is to find rental properties that's, within South Burlington and the greater area. So, okay. Any other general questions or thoughts? Are we ready to take a motion to close this hearing and invite the applicant back for final plat?
I would request public comment.
Thank you. I always forget that. Are there any public comments? On the phone, on the web? Nope, hearing none. Board, are we ready to craft a motion to close this hearing? I will make a motion that we close the hearing and see the applicant next at final plat. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? Okay,
What about Jim?
Jim was
Oh, Jim was
recused from
recused.
this one.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you very
We'll
much.
see you back here.
Thank you.
Can you check to see if he's still on the?
No, he's
looks
not.
Like he's, yeah, he is.
Oh, is he?
Okay,
You have under her hide.
we're trying to find a board member who's on the phone.
He's here.
He's here. Hi, Jim. Okay. Now we will proceed to number 7 on the agenda, which is preliminary and final plat SD 2121 of Donald and Lois Kerwin to amend a previously approved planned unit development of 2 lots. The amendment is to subdivide lot 2, 0.83 acres, into 3 lots of 0.28 acres each in order to develop a single-family home on each at 1420 Hinesburg Road. Are there any board members who need to make a disclosure or recuse themselves?
Jim, are you back with us?
Yeah.
Great.
Great. Who is here for the applicant? Hello.
Hi, I'm Billy Roberts with Civil Engineering Associates on behalf of the Donald and Lois Kerwin.
Can you speak up a little, or I had a hard time hearing you.
This is Billy Roberts. I'm with Civil Engineering Associates on behalf of Donald and Lois Kerwin.
Okay. Are there any other people here with you that will be testifying today?
No.
Okay. Billy, I'm going to swear you in. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Thank you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this project? We've seen it before, we've discussed it before, but I think it's always helpful to have a little reminder and a little overview of the project.
Yep. So this project is on lot 2 of the, it's currently a two lot subdivision that previously happened. This application seeks to divide lot 3 lot 2 into 3 equal lots, which would make it a PUD. This is southeast of Butler Farms. So the connection point would be on Highland Terrace Road, which connects off Du Bois Drive and then loops down to Route 116 Hinesburg Road again. This application seeks for each house to have its own driveway, and each of the homes would have access to an on-site drilled well. 2 of the houses would share one well, and one house would have another well drilled. All the wastewater flows would go to municipal sewer. And yeah.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So let us look at the staff report and go through the staff comments. And the board can share its thoughts with you, and you can respond to the comments as well. The first staff comment is the applicant's plat plan notes the lots are 12,000 square feet, while the application form indicates 11,979 square feet. Staff recommend the board ask the applicant to clarify. So if you could do that, please, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so these are 3 equal lots. They're all 12,000 square feet in size.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant need to make any changes to any of the documentation?
What the plan says governs, so I think they are, let me rephrase that, they are okay.
Okay, thank you. Number 2, staff recommends the board consider whether the scrub tree area on the east warrants requiring the applicant to minimize disturbance to allow for tree preservation. Staff notes the location of the home supports a strong street presence, and preservation of these trees may detract from that presence. If the board determines the applicant should preserve trees, staff recommends the board require the applicant to update the plans to reduce impacts and show a limit of tree clearing. So I guess we'll ask you, Billy, if you could respond to this, and the board can ask any questions of you.
Yeah, so right now we're showing there's a lot of scrub trees that aren't that visually appealing. And a lot of these trees we are showing to be removed for installation of utilities. The removal of these trees would allow for a fresh start in the area. It's kind of, right now it's kind of an overgrown area. It's not really well maintained. So a fresh start might be beneficial for this.
So when you say a fresh start, are you talking about removing all the scrub trees and all the vegetation there and making new plantings?
The option for new plantings would be available. We are not proposing any plantings at this time, but we are proposing to remove all the trees along Highland Terrace for installation of utilities for us that would support the project.
I'm sorry, did you say installation or installation? Installation or insulation of utilities?
Installation.
Okay, thank you.
Install.
So, questions about removal of the trees and?
Just to be clear, the utility, the entire frontage would be stripped to accommodate the utilities?
As designed,
Yeah.
right? Because if
Yeah.
they put the utilities under the driveways instead of off to the side of the driveways, there's a potential. I mean, basically, as they have the project, that's what would happen. But that doesn't preclude a shared driveway between all 3 lots, or putting the utilities under the driveway. We don't have to necessarily respond to black or white here. There are some options available.
Right, I'm just trying to get a sense, is the clearing in a north-south direction, or is it 3 east-west, like west-east?
It's the north-south direction. I'm gonna kind of
Along Highland.
Yeah,
Right.
draw on the plan. It's gosh, this is hard to see. Because there's no real tree line, but I think the trees are sort of here-ish.
Right.
Billy, is that about right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And I guess what I'm getting at is this one of those things where we're essentially approving the lots and individual homeowners can do what they want at the
Well,
time?
this is a PUD, so not exactly.
Okay, all right.
There are restrictions. I think the board tends to be a little more flexible when it's not intended to be a large neighborhood, but individual lots that are stuck with being a PUD because of their location in the SEQ. But the board does have the authority to place whatever restrictions they feel appropriate on these lots.
I mean, personally, I'm okay with the 3 separate driveways because you're trying to create a neighborhood feel. That's okay to me, and I guess to the extent that some of the clearing can be minimized, only to not shock the neighbors across the street,
Right.
then come back with some ideas or options, or maybe it's a combination of some clearing plus some new landscaping elements. That's kind of the way I feel.
So just to be clear, this is preliminary and final plat, so they won't be coming back for final plat.
Okay.
Other folks, comments, questions? What is our pleasure then? Shall we?
Well, one other thing we could do is I don't quite remember if it was in the it, but we could go to Google Street View and kind of look at the trees too.
Okay.
I know I'm putting a lot on you all of a
I
sudden,
have
Delilah.
to stop sharing in order to bring up the internet.
Why don't I share it? Because I happen to have our parcel viewer up from earlier.
Okay, why don't you do that?
Okay. Actually, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to go to Street View Maps. Highland Terrace, South Burlington, and drop our friend somewhere in this vicinity, I think. And look across the street. Okay. I am going to share my screen. Oh, I think you might have to invite me. I am
Oh.
City of South Burlington Secondary, if you don't mind. Thank you. I'm just going to share that one application. So this is the line of trees that we're talking
Oh,
about.
yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
it's
a lot of trees.
It's very scrubby.
very
Just the
scrubby.
Normandy bocage there, yeah.
No idea what that means.
Okay, you're young.
So we're not talking mature trees. We're
No.
talking
Yep.
scrubby trees. Scrubby trees.
Mhm.
So is the board's feeling that they can live with the clearing of the trees?
I'm okay with clearing of the scrub, but it'd be nice to have some trees planted to mimic the other side of the street, which appears to have some
Mhm.
more mature trees. I mean, it will take a while for them to get there, but it would be nice to have something instead of a completely cleared. I mean, it varies, obviously. There's a little mix of things, or to the extent trees at the corners of the lot so that there's a little bit of a sense of privacy from lot to lot or something to delineate rather than 3 curb cuts in a row. I mean, yeah.
But-
I mean, I don't know how much leeway we have. in
Right,
this.
I was
don't
just
wanna,
gonna
We
say,
like-
can
certainly
we-
do. Yes, it's a PUD. You are welcome to place whatever restrictions you think are appropriate on the application.
So we could require
Landscaping
some,
is certainly within the normal scope of the board.
Okay.
Let me put it that way.
I kind of agree with Dan. It would be nice to have some delineation and some decent trees and require that. What do other people think?
No, I agree as well. It doesn't look like there's much there currently that's worth preserving,
Right,
but
exactly. Yeah.
creating a nice street presence
Right.
with new trees
Okay.
that will mature would be a good idea.
I would note that a large portion of the driveway is within the city right of way. And so I don't think that there's any problem requiring trees within the city right of way, but there's a couple things you need to be cognizant of. One is that there's a little bit of a drainage ditch there. So any trees shouldn't be like in the bottom of the ditch. They should be sort of off to the side of the ditch. And then, make a conscious choice about whether the trees are on the properties that you're going to require or the trees are within the city right of way. And I think either is fine, but I think it's a conscious decision that should be made.
Are there can you give us any guidance about in design what's preferable?
Well, if they're in the city right of way, they're the city's responsibility to maintain. Billy, there's no overhead utility here, right?
Billy?
No, not on Terrace.
Okay. I don't know that we have.
I mean, typically, the arborist reviews what they propose and approves the type of street tree.
So can we require a certain number of trees in consultation with the
City
city
arborist?
arborist in our any future decision?
I think that's reasonable. It's not, I mean, if you're specific about it, deciduous species with a caliper no less than 2.5 inches at installation, 2 per lot near the eastern property line,
Mhm.
or 2 per lot within the city right of way near the eastern property line,
Mhm.
whichever you prefer. I think that's specific enough. Yeah.
Okay. Board, what do you think? Right away or property?
Does the city have other plantings along this road that it maintains?
No, not on this road, I don't think.
But elsewhere,
Right.
Yeah, other developments. get street trees.
And
Yeah.
Dubois Drive, I believe, has
Has street trees.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not, that far off from other places.
And are there other lots to the north or south of this that might be developed in the future such that requiring some street trees now?
If we put it in the city right away and they decide they want a sidewalk later, do they get cut down?
Probably.
good question.
And yes, there are a couple other lots north of this that have a similar development potential to this lot.
Right.
And then one farther south of this as well. Not immediately south. That one has already been subdivided, but
Right.
south of this, there's potential. So, yeah, it could be a pattern that gets established along the street.
So let's not, I would suggest, let's not mess with the future installation of a sidewalk or creation of a sidewalk. Let's put them on the property. Let's require them to be on the property.
That sounds okay, yeah.
I think so.
I'm a neighbor on Highland Terrace. I have some comments germane to the discussion, but I'm unclear when I can weigh in.
Okay, thank you. After we go through the staff comments, we will ask for public comment and we would welcome your thoughts and comments at that time.
And the
Okay.
board, has the opportunity to sort of revisit this topic if they're, if the public comments are, relevant and
Right.
interested in changing the decision.
Would you mind sticking around for a while so we can get through the staff comments and then we'll be glad to hear you?
Yeah, I'll try to do that. Thank you.
What is your name, please?
Mark Abrams.
Oh, yes. We've heard you in the past. Thank
Yes.
you. Okay. Staff comment number 3. Staff considers this response does not adequately address the related criteria, and that is referring to a response the applicant provided in response to the criteria or values outlined in the Vermont wetland rules. Staff recommends the board discuss the above 3 criteria, A through C, with the applicant, including responses to the following questions. What is the wetland's ability to carry or store floodwaters, and how will that be affected by the project? How will the project minimize sedimentation? The driveways are proposed to be gravel. The wetland functions and values may not be significant, but how is the proposed condition an improvement over existing? And we see on the screen the criteria A through C. So let's have a discussion about that. What could we ask of the applicant to speak more fully to the 3 criteria ABC?
I do have, I guess one of the second bullet there about sedimentation. The driveways are proposed to be gravel, and we know that those will get compressed over time anyway, and then potentially get new gravel added every year or 2 or 3. So is there a reason they couldn't be paved?
Potentially they could be paved. For this project, we had just shown them as gravel driveways. There are other gravel driveways along Highland Terrace. So we had just provided a gravel driveway just as starters.
And can you respond to those more of the bullet points there about what is the wetlands ability to carry, how will that be affected by the project, et cetera? If you want to elaborate on that? I see
Sure, yeah. So we had Tina Heath from the Vermont Wetland Program come out. She concluded that the wetland is not a significant value. It's not associated with a stream, and it doesn't have an outlet. The source of the wetland there is fed by a foundation drain that comes from 1420 Highland Terrace, so the lot 1 residence to the west. That's the source of the wetland. This project proposes to extend that foundation drain to continue to a new swale that would discharge adjacent to Highland Terrace, eventually through the culverts that would run underneath the driveway. So that wetland there, the source is going to be moved, and we're going to be conveying that water and getting it to flow out of there.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is Marla, is that helpful?
I mean, no, I do not find it to be helpful because the
Okay.
criteria, and I'm just going to zoom in on my own page so I can see it a little more clearly, are the board needs to determine whether the encroachment will adversely affect the property of to carry or store floodwaters. It sounds like the floodwaters in quotation marks, if it's just a foundation drain, will in fact be conveyed more directly. Will not adversely affect the ability of the proposed stormwater treatment system to reduce sedimentation. As Dan noted, they're proposing gravel driveways. I don't know that gravel driveways reduce sedimentation. And then the specific wetlands functions and values, Billy noted that there is not significant functions and values, but in order to be a wetland, it does have some function and value, however minimal. And those functions may be, flood management or stormwater treatment or what have you, which we've seen it a bunch of times before. So I don't know that how removing flow from the wetlands improves the wetlands functions and values. And I don't know that we've seen how these impacts are minimized or mitigated. If the board determines that this wetland is so small and so insignificant that they're going to approve the impacts anyway, that's fine. But I don't think that we've received testimony with which to make that decision.
So are you suggesting perhaps that the board consider, after we review the staff comments and take public comment, that we continue this hearing so that the applicant can provide adequate testimony about and speak to these three criteria?
So pulling back the curtain a little bit, there was a lot of back and forth before this got to you. We always try to have a really good project get to you guys. And I'm not sure that the applicant is prepared to prepare additional testimony without some more direction from the board. Because I did try to convey some of this stuff, and the result is what's written in the staff report.
Thanks, Marla. I know it's a hassle. Can you go to the map and get out the magic marker and show us what kind of wetlands we're talking about and what is the relative impact? Because we're trying to balance the wetland impacts with some good density here
So the
and small
wetland
lots.
is, oops, let me try again. Wetland is here-ish.
And it's a class
And it's a class 3.
3.
And then the buffer, you can see, obviously is around the wetland.
It's kind of a bullseye. Where the
Sorry. that was
So,
me.
is there, and again, because I'm still relatively new to this, given this situation, there obviously would need to be mitigation measures because the impacts are right on top of the wetland and the buffer. So, what would be some things that those in the professional community would recommend? Is it additional landscaping along the back of the lot to help, I won't say recreate a wetland, but provide some of the treatment functions that a wetland provides through more vegetation?
Well, and I think that's where the functions and values come in. Knowing what functions, however limited, this wetland provides. If it's habitat, some vegetation may be useful. If it's stormwater treatment, a little bit of a detention might be appropriate. You know, if it is, I don't know, whatever other functions, you know, I think the mitigation, if mitigation is required, should be tailored to the functions. And then minimization, you know, kind of speaks for itself. Like, can this be minimized? And if not, you know, what is
And we don't have a
offsetting that?
wetlands mitigation bank type program like, right, we don't have any kind of
Right.
like that. And do we ever do things where perhaps like the back of the lot is created as a wetland or something, you know, something where you're essentially shifting the drainage around? Like if you were able to pick up this little class 3 wetland and move it, is it feasible to do that from an engineering perspective? Because obviously, you know, essentially, yeah, moving the water, moving the wetland to the west.
And is it sound to build homes? I know it's a class 3 wetland, but does that create flooding issues for the homes?
Are they all going to have drainage systems? I guess that'd be the question for the applicant.
Yeah, they would have foundation drains around the foundation of the house.
Right.
Okay.
And some pump systems too, whole house systems like that, or just foundation drains?
No, just foundation drains.
Okay. I'm kind of looking at, I'm kind of punting to Marla or punting to back to the engineers about other kind of mitigation measures that are commonly used in this situation, because I'm sure it's been run into other places, right?
Well, it looks like here too, like I'm looking at the proposed conditions plan, and so the class 3 wetland you're saying was formed essentially from the foundation drain, but you're proposing to extend that foundation drain into the proposed swale. So essentially, if you know that wetland will go away.
And will
Right.
another one be created?
No. So if you can zoom in, is that the same sheet that I'm looking at?
To the swale?
Yeah, so so right there where your cursor just was, Delilah. So you guys see that dark line that says FD? It's up by the property line.
East-west line that says
Yes.
FD?
Yeah, so the
Yes.
darker one is the proposed extension of the foundation drain. So, and then you can see the lighter FD line is the existing. So it looks like their proposal is that they're going to take that foundation drain, and then instead of having it daylight where it does now and feeding into the wetland, it's going to be extended and then picked up into the drainage swale. So effectively, that wetland is it's going to go away.
Okay.
But the water goes somewhere. The water goes somewhere,
It
right?
goes drained into the swale.
Into the
Right,
swale
so
on the street.
they're redirecting it into the swale, and then that will discharge. If you looked at Google Street View, there's a catch basin
Okay.
that's kind of off to the side of the road. So it looks to me like that's where it would all eventually drain to.
Okay, so I asked that the weird question, but is there, since the back of the lot abuts the back of the lot of the other property from which it's being subdivided, is there a way to have it drain to the west and create?
I think elevation goes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the eastern side is downhill from the western side.
How far, or what's the relative grade? Only because I only say this in part because I have a sump pump that when I had a whole house drainage system, it used to, before I bought it, it used to discharge into the city's stormwater system.
Mhm.
Instead, I have it discharge into my rain garden,
Okay.
and so it pumps. You know, it runs pretty regularly, and so I'm kind of, if it's feasible to pump, if we're trying to maintain a wet spot, a wetland, is it feasible to essentially create a wetland on the back of the property?
I would ask the fundamental question, do we have enough information to decide if it is worth jumping through a bunch of hoops for this wetland? And if we do have enough information to decide, is it worth jumping through a bunch of hoops to protect this wetland? What's the board's temperature on that?
I'm feeling a little over my head. I don't have an ounce of civil engineering in my body. So I'm going
Nor do I, despite my bloviating. So you know.
I was impressed. Stephanie,
I mean, I rely on my team of natural resource scientists But I mean, if I take it at face value and say that, okay, if the wetland truly was created by the foundation drain of the building to the west, then I don't see, I mean, it's probably treating, it's not going to get a ton of stormwater. It'll get some, but if it's the foundation drain of the building. And then habitat is, all of that's kind of out of my realm.
Jim?
This is Jim. Yeah, I guess that's I guess that's where I am, is that we haven't been provided that information for those ABC criteria there. So it's hard for me to say that, to consider the following standards if they haven't been addressed by the applicant.
Thanks, Jim. So what shall we do, board?
Back again, and this for staff, what criteria, like, we can permit encroachment in the class 3 wetland, provided we think there's enough mitigation or things going on. And
Yes.
so that's why I'm trying to think of, like, well, what can be done to mitigate it. So
Right. So for example,
But I guess that's not our job. I feel like we're not even really skilled to do that.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you don't have enough information based on those.
yeah,
these
so at the last hearing, we heard from someone who wanted to do a stormwater project that impacted a class 3 wetland, and they were able to say, the functions of this wetland are X, and this stormwater pond should be allowed because it actually improves stormwater treatment.
Right.
So it was, a more responsive response to these criteria, and it was more tailored to what. And it's not that the board is inclined or disinclined to approve or deny any of this. It's more that
We need to understand.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're going to need more information. Let's go ahead and move through the rest of the comments, and then we'll hear public comment, and we'll decide what we want to do. Number 4, driveway drainage is proposed to consist of 12-inch pipes with exactly 2 feet of cover. City standards require a minimum driveway culvert size of 18 inches with a 2 foot of cover and stone spillway at the downstream end of each culvert. Alternatively, the driveways may be graded to allow drainage to flow across them if adjacent grades allow. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to modify the driveway drainage prior to closing the hearing. So, Billy, what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, so we had a conversation with Justin Rabideau with Public Works after the last meeting to work out these driveway designs. And he agreed with us that there's not enough elevation there to be able to utilize an 18-inch culvert. So we settled on a 15-inch culvert just because there's not enough elevation to make the culverts work with the cover that is required if we had an 18-inch. So he was able to, he agreed that we could use a 15-inch for these driveways.
And would that have a 2 foot cover?
Yes.
2 feet of cover over the top of the pipe, or are you going from invert?
No, that would be over the top of the pipe.
So the way that they're designed now, when I do the math out, it didn't look like there was 2 feet of cover proposed.
Can we accept 15? Standard is 18?
If they've talked to Justin, and I have no reason to doubt in this case, I would, there is the cover issue, and then I would also note that, the adjacent property was approved with driveways with a low spot of the flow going over the driveway, and that's not unheard of either. So if they can't get 2 feet of cover, that's still on the table.
Well, could they use a different pipe and get 1 foot of cover?
I can't make that decision for pipes that are in the city right of way. I would have to talk to Justin.
Gotcha.
So, okay, another reason we might not be able to close tonight. Billy, do you have anything else to say about this?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on to number 5, the proposed single-family homes on lots 2, 3, and 4 will be oriented to face Highland Terrace. Primary entries will face the street. No statement as to windows has been made. The provided elevations show very few windows on any facade. Roof lines are mixed and oriented both east and west, north and south. Staff recommends the board determine whether they consider this criterion met. Now, the standards related to glazing and the amount of glazing and the direction of the glazing, are they not applicable to PUDs?
They are applicable to PUDs.
Right. So
and
They
the
are.
to
standard,
board.
the standard is immediately above. It says a minimum of 35%. I mean, that's only part of the standard. The whole standard is residential buildings must be oriented to the street. Check. Residential entries or primary entries must face the street. Check. Secondary buildings may open to garages and or parking areas. A minimum of 35% of translucent windows and surfaces should be oriented to the south. And then the rest of the standard is about the SEQ NRN, which is not us. So the ones that are musts, they have covered, and the ones that are shoulds, they may or may not have covered. But you can see from this one that there's just not a lot of glazing, and I didn't do the math, and they didn't provide the math.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we could ask for that.
The
Yeah.
board in the past has found that, a should is not a shall and has not worried too much about it. I would look at this and I'd say, maybe 20%, 25% is oriented to the south. That's not terrible. It's not the best. So yes, you can ask for that, certainly, and then make a determination. Or you could decide that this is okay, or you could say what would be most helpful is either decide it's okay tonight or tell them come back with some extra windows next time. Or meet it next time, so that we don't have to have this, we just have it cut and dry, done.
Yeah, I'll chime in on the porch being in the front. Is that part of the structure so that the garage is truly set back from it? Okay. It's interesting because when I look at the photo, not the design, I think it's the previous one. It shows like a photo of like this is what the house might look like, and then this one. To me, the garage is still the dominant feature of this house.
I agree.
And I know it's not the village district, right? We're not trying to create hidey-ho neighbor and there's a sidewalk and.
Well, but that
But
is a
it
requirement.
strikes me as a commercial building when I look at this because it's almost like there's a door and a little small,
Corrugated stuff.
a little small, and not so much the corrugated, but there's the door and there's this tiny little window here. It's not even like a bay window or a welcoming window or a living room window. It's kind of like it strikes me as a commercial building, and I don't want to get too into visual and aesthetics and micromanage, but on the other hand, I guess the question is, are these homes, I understand squeezing 3 lots in there, and we certainly need the housing. Is the edge of the north and south, are they right to the setback? Could these homes be wider and therefore the garage could be not so much the dominant feature? Because right now it's the frontage, it's like 55-60% of the frontage is the garage.
Billy?
Well, these homes can be modified to be wider. They are set to the 25-foot build-to line. So they're not on the front setback. In this district, they have to be on the 25-foot build-to line, which I think the front setback's 20 feet. So they're 5 feet beyond that front setback line.
What
but
about
if
the
they-
side setback? It's the side setback that I'm most worried about.
Oh, the side setback, that's also, in this district, it's 10 feet. So there is room to make the buildings wider. We would have to discuss that with the applicant, but the primary goal for the applicant is primarily to get the PUD in order to sell the lots. it's likely that when it comes time to be built, there may be design changes with the homes.
Right. Because it would, I guess when I look at it, would be by making them a little wider north-south, you could decrease the dominance of the garage, but
I'm also concerned about the lack of glazing. I think that would improve the attractiveness of the houses.
So in criteria 9.08C4, which is on the same page as comment number 5 that we're talking about, there is some language about the building width needs to be at least 12 feet, and the garage must be set back at least 8 feet. If the board is feeling like that is not cutting it with this style home, there is the opportunity to, modify that criteria somewhat. Though, this is the standard that the Planning Commission has set. And I always caution the board that when there's a specific numeric criterion that the Planning Commission has chosen, if you choose to impose conditions of a PUD that differ or waive the specific numeric criterion, you are taking on a policymaking role as opposed to a legislative role. When it's more
referring specifically to that glazing number.
no, the glazing number, I'm less worried about. The glazing number is a should, and the board does tend to apply it as a should. I'm talking about standard number 4, about the building width of a single or two-family dwelling shall be no less than 12 feet, and the garage needs to be set back 8 feet from that minimum 12-foot section.
But I didn't think the garage looked like it was set back 8 feet. Is it?
It is because the porch is 8 feet deep.
Oh, and that counts. Okay.
But it's not well, in this case, the building width is still going to be more than 12 feet, right? So that's fine, right? That's met, right?
Right, so the specific numeric criteria are met
Yeah.
in this case. So the board's concern, I think in this case, is with the regulatory language less than with what they have shown.
Okay.
Unless it's because of the style of the building that it has a different appearance than what you're used to seeing.
Okay, so what do folks think?
And just to be clear, there's no, I'm just applying my aesthetic grumpiness about the dominance of the garage. That's all. There's no real standard I'm applying, right?
Well, there is a standard, and they've met it.
8 feet back.
Right. Yeah, the setback part's okay. It's just more, there is no standard about could a 3-car garage go in front?
As long as it's set back at least 8 feet, and yes.
Okay. That's the next round of revisions to the LDRs. Sorry.
No, I think that's a great thing to bring up. Like this, every time you write a regulation, as you well know, there's always that one thing that pops up where you're like, oh, we didn't consider
Didn't think of that. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So what shall we do, board? I'm concerned about the glazing. I'm going to be honest. I mean, we have a standard. They haven't met the standard. I'd like to see them get closer to the standard.
Well, so one thing that can be done here and has been done on other lots on Highland Terrace is, these are sample homes. This in the narrative that's in blue above item number 5, it kind of talks about what elements of these homes will be retained. And so you could add something that says, and the glazing shall be 35% of the glazing shall face south. Can I have an opinion for a second? The language of this standard has always bothered me because it says a minimum of 35% of the windows and surfaces shall be oriented to the south, or should be oriented to the south. If they choose to have 0 windows on the north, west, and east sides, they've met the standard.
Right.
So by requiring them to meet this standard, it doesn't necessarily result in more windows to the south. It just results in more of the windows to the south.
Right. Okay. Do you have a suggestion?
My suggestion to the planning commission on this very issue was to change it to a minimum percent of the area of the facade. But
Okay.
what that number is up to them.
Okay. So board, what are your thoughts about this?
Mostly, I just feel like they haven't provided us enough information about the wetland. They sort of sprung
Mhm.
it on us that was even there. And I'm not convinced that we have enough information to make a decision one way or another.
So it's likely we'll ask them to come back with that. But in terms of the glazing, are folks satisfied with what they've proposed? Or do we want to push back?
I would like to see something close to the 35%. Make it more attractive as well as achieve some of the other goals of solar gain, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can people live with that? I think we're in the same wavelength, Dan.
What about Jim?
Jim?
Yep, I am too.
Okay. All right. So I think that's it for staff comments. I'd like to open it up for, well, before we go to public comment, Billy, do you have anything to say at this point?
So the glazing, is that like, is that a description added to what we were proposing with the like T11 siding and the gable ends, or is that like we need new plans to be sent in?
I didn't hear the last part of what you said. We need to what?
So is that a description that gets added to what we had proposed, or do we gotta send in new plans?
It sounds like we want to see more glazing.
And I would say we want to see new plans, not just text, but
Yeah.
No.
So do you have any, before we move on to public comment, do you have any other questions or comments?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Adams, I understand you want to make, pardon? Abrams, I'm sorry, thank you. I understand you want to make some comments. Let me just find out how many other people want to make comments about this project? People online, comments? Okay, well, maybe some will emerge. Mr. Abrams, tell us what's on your
Yes.
mind.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience.
you can turn your camera on if you like to.
That's okay, thank you.
He's in his pajamas like most of us are.
I've been, I wonder how much consideration the various boards through the years have given to the character impact of new designs on long-established neighborhoods. I moved to Highland Terrace in August of 1981, and it had been here for at least 2, 3 or more years before that. The whole street had fairly long lots running to the east. Mine is about 13 acres. I've been paying taxes on it since 1981. And unlike today, where the new trends and popularity of mixed neighborhood development, where you have single family homes, duplexes, condos, and so forth, all different formats, where the buyer can go into a major life decision with their eyes fully open and make their choices. At Highland Terrace, there are decades of a very quiet street with very, to me, valuable and scientifically validated valuable green space, green resources on the west side of the street. Some of it, until recently, was right across the view from where I spend an awful lot of time in my office. And they've been torn out. And I just wonder how much awareness of impact on established neighbors, how much thought has been given to that. At this point, there's still some of the character preservable on this street. And one question comes to my mind. I like to see people doing what they choose to do if possible with private property. But I would ask that access to any lots that are on Route 116 be made from Route 116. I've been very unhappy, and some of the neighbors as well, with the multiple driveways going in and small houses, such as have been described here. This can impact property values, aesthetics, and more traffic, more distraction, and a number of other factors. I submitted a proposed statute to the City Council, and I think DRB in 2019, proposing that the city give due respect and consideration to established neighborhoods and grandfather them in so they be exempt at such a character change. And I must say that the question arose in my mind when it first started, came to my awareness. What are the actual qualifications of the city to perform social engineering without any consideration of existing human beings? I noticed as well, the city council was quite put off balance and upset when it wasn't invited to the city of Burlington's meetings about whether or not to permit higher ground to settle in close to Queen City Park. There was a lot of reaction to impacts of activity, noise, change of character, things like that. I thought it was ironic. All that said, I would request that if people want to put a lot of houses behind their homes, fine, but do so through their own driveway. Why ruin another half of the street, ripping it all down, the green screening? Be responsible. You want to develop, do it through your property. So that's a short form. I can resubmit the proposal that goes into a lot more detail. And 2 years ago, October, I went before the board with a scientist giving testimony, a lot of data, and that went to the staffers on the extensive scientific value of green space and its effects on physical and emotional health and recovery from surgery. Just out of a hospital window, landmark study of comparing very similar post-surgical patients who one group had a view of trees, the other group had a view of something unpleasant or plain. And there was a statistically very significant difference in the speed of recovery and reduction in the use of painkillers. That's Roger Ulrich, ULRICH's study. But since that time, there's extensive data on that. And we want to preserve the natural environment as much as possible. You folks in the city have a tricky job to thread the needle through all these factors, but just give me a reaction if you would. Isn't any of this new to you in terms of established neighborhood reaction to radical change? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abrams.
I can comment as best I can.
Sure.
So if you look at page 9 of the agenda item there, there's of the staff report. There's a discussion about criteria for review. And as it goes, at the bottom of page 9, the comprehensive plan identifies the plan development patterns for the project area as lower intensity, principally residential development. And then it defines what lower intensity, principally residential is defined as follows. So this is the SEQ, and what's the name? What district is this in again? Neighborhood residential? Right. So residential use is encouraged, and there's a description at the right there at the top of page 10. I mean, it's the zoning bylaws that set the general character for each district and the allowable uses and the relative density, and provides guidance to the board. So the density is compatible at 4 units per acre. It seems consistent with the description of the district. So the board and the applicants look to that guidance. So your concerns, I understand where you're coming from, and but it's in this district. It's not in a other districts in the SEQ that are lower residential with larger lot sizes, that kind of thing, broad open vistas, farmland character, what people think of as rural, because this is defined as a neighborhood residential. And so that's what this is doing, I guess. So that's the only comment I would have. So.
No, thank you. I would, this is Mark Abrams again. I would respond to that from my on the ground perspective that and recommend to the city that going forward, whatever goes into the determination of districts would do well to focus down in more detail and actually maybe get people out. We're not a huge city. Get people out and get a real world view of these neighborhoods that are under that I would say inadequate magnifying glass. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your comments, though. I appreciate the time.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Abrams. And you're absolutely right. It is difficult to balance all of the needs and wishes, open land, natural habitat, need for affordable housing. These all have to get balanced out, and it's never easy to see change. But I appreciate your comments, and thank you. So are there any other members of the public who would like to weigh in on this project? Okay, thank you. So it seems to me that we need more information from the applicant, and that we should therefore continue the hearing to a later date so that information can be provided, information about the wetland and meeting those criteria and glazing, all of that. So
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
With the discussion about trees, would it, if it's going to be continued anyway, it'd be super slick if they could propose some trees and we could get that reviewed before
Yes.
we see them again, rather than having to do it as a condition.
Sure. Did you catch that, Billy? Billy?
Yes, yeah,
Did you hear Marla's comment?
yes.
Okay. So she can look forward to hearing from you about that, so she can run that by the city arborist, I guess? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Is a motion appropriate, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would move to continue preliminary and final plat application SD 21-21, 1420 Hinesburg Road to a date in the future.
And I would second that.
You have to make a specific motion. It has to be to a specific date.
And can I ask what do we have room for?
We have room on October 5th, if you would like. Billy, that means you have to get me everything in 2 weeks' time. Does that sound doable?
Yes, that'll work.
I would amend my motion to continue the hearing for this SD 21-21 to October 5th.
And I will second that motion. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? I think the motion is carried. Or the motion is carried. I know it is. Okay, thank you, Billy. And, okay, turning back to the agenda, we now need to review the minutes of July 20th and August 3rd. Have people had a chance to read the minutes? Would someone like to make a motion that do we have to do each one separately?
You can do them together.
Okay. Here you go. I move that we accept the minutes of July 20th and August 3rd, 2021.
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The motion is carried. And that brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there any other business?
So there will not be a DRB meeting on the 21st. It's not been warned. There's nothing to worry about. Just people are in a rhythm. There's a slight interruption to your rhythm. So our next meeting will be October 5th.
Yes. Okay. Do we need a motion to close? I never
do not.
Okay. So I say we close the meeting, end the meeting.
Thank you.
I think we can
This
say-
conference is no longer being recorded.